I suppose it does beg the question, and I'll put this one to Philippa. I mean, we ought to put this in context, and probably should have done at the start. How bad is bribery and corruption in British business?
Oh, I think it's actually probably very low. I don't think, it's not the big ogre that we think it is. I think there's some very difficult issues that businesses face when they do business, and it's not just overseas. Some, instances here in the UK. So, but that's where companies have a choice, and there have certainly been enough examples. Unfortunately, they don't really talk about it, where companies have chosen not to do business. They've chosen to walk away because they don't want to be involved in bribery or influencing people unduly. So they just walk away from that business. But they tend not to talk about it, partly because they might want to go back into that country at a later date, so they don't want to say, and all the other things that come with it. They'd rather just walk away quietly. But it does happen, and I think we've actually got very high standards in this country. I think the Act was changed, and I agree with Stuart about the name of it. At best, it should have been the Anti-Bribery Act, because it could be, some people have joked about how it may teach you how to bribe, but it falls into that category of just trying to catch up. Because the UK was seen not to be very hard on this because there'd been no action. There'd been no real cases brought by the SFO over many years, and I think there hadn't actually been any cases brought under the 1893 Act or 96 Act. You can tell me, Sean, whichever one it was. And so we had to do something to modernise legislation, but we have leapfrogged the world. But I think everybody actually is going to follow us.
It's interesting you mentioned the SFO, because I was talking to a couple of people who run SMEs prior to this conversation, and they were saying, I bet the Bribery Act turns out to be just like effectively serious fraud. In other words, there's a kind of an awareness, which may be a modern myth, that the SFO can only really go after very, very major cases, and an awful lot below is never targeted. And and that, in one sense, in the context of the Bribery Act, is an excuse to do nothing, because it's like, it'll never affect me because I'm not a big enough fish in that pond. Do you think there's a danger that that's the way it may be in terms?
I think there is a danger. I think that's a false sense of comfort, actually, because the SFO will pick up on this. But they're going to be picking up on culture. If you've got the odd instance of a facilitation payment being paid, or the odd case of an act of bribery, and the company comes along to the SFO and says, mea culpa, we found this, etc., etc., then you will be treated in a very different way than if it's brought by an outsider, and the SFO then goes investigating cold, as it were. In that instance, you're more likely to be brought under the Criminal Act than a civil case. But what the SFO will be looking at, is this an isolated case, or is this the culture of the company? And if it's the culture of the company, just cut the corner here, cut the corner there, pay this backwards, whatever, then the SFO will come down very hard indeed. But if it is just a one-off, and a rogue or whatever, then they will be looking at it in a different light.
The issue is, as I come back to the earlier point, is we're trying to break into new markets. How do you ensure that the people that are working for you, not as direct employees, are somehow adhering to it? So what British business will do, as it always does, it will spend time putting in systems, putting in processes, and then adhering to it. But let's be frank about it, it's another cost and another burden on business.
It's interesting because, you see, I have to be honest with you and say that, that as an SME, is that I was now under the impression that it would be wise of me, and I'll put this to Sean, it would be wise of me just to note, if nothing else, when I am entertained or when I receive a gift. Is this not correct?
I think it is right, and the easy way to make sure you can go away from the match or the night away with a clean conscience is just to check, look, we have our policies here, this is in line with that. We're advised through the various best practice websites to check that what we're doing now is consistent with your own business's ethical business policy. If you just confirm that's in order, then that's absolutely fine. And that's a way of demonstrating two things. One, that you've thought about it and you've asked proper questions. And secondly, as far as you are concerned, you're dealing with openness and transparency, which is at the heart of most sensible business behaviour.
It did focus my mind, because I remember there was an independent production company where an employee, a freelance, and it comes back to this nature of subcontracting too, took money off somebody to strategically place a product. Now, in the old days, that would have probably been Ofcom, slap on the wrist, maybe fine, the broadcaster gets punished, the production company gets punished. It's slightly different now, isn't it? Because the employee's committed a crime, and I have committed a crime if I've not tried to prevent him from doing it.
That's right. And as a director, as a responsible officer, I might be liable effectively thrice over. It's my company, it's me and my employee. And SMEs need to be mindful of this, especially when they're dealing overseas. It could be that some larger businesses who are contracting with them and saying, we want you to do this, we want you to forage new markets, we want you to go out and lay some cables, it's somewhere in Middle Europe. They're taking the risk and in a sense being paid to take the risk for larger organisations. And they must be careful that they don't act as the patsy of a larger contracting party. And they need to insulate themselves. The chances are that a larger contractor will say, you must comply with all applicable legislation. It's a one-liner. It looks like a no-brainer to sign up to that, and how could you negotiate otherwise when you're signing the contract? But essentially, they're laying the contractual risk on you as the SME of compliance with the same obligations which apply to a larger party with larger resources. So you have to get yourself up to speed to insulate yourself, not so much against the SFO or hostile action from there, but against a counterparty who decides they want to pay you less or walk away from a deal once the mud starts to fly. So it's a simple, sensible business precaution to be familiar with these principles, which include due diligence on counterparties, risk assessment, all the things that SME owners and managers are intuitively doing anyway, because it means more to them. The life and soul of their business is their own conduct as it is.
That's a neat way to kind of approach a conclusion. I think we should end by just asking each of you in turn. I'll begin with you, Stuart. What, in a nutshell, is your advice to SMEs watching this webcast?
The advice is don't put your head in the sand. There is now circa 21 weeks for where if you do not have adequate procedures in place as a director of that business, you do face potential issues. I think the one thing I would also like to say is it's not just about the law. I think it's about reputation, whether that is reputation on a potential future sell or just in the competitive landscape. Whether cases at the SME level get through to the SFO is one thing, but what you don't want is the local paper or the local authority believing that your tender may be dismissed because wasn't there some rumours about bribery a year or two ago. I think it is about best practice, and it's don't sit back and do not wait.
Okay, Sean, do you have anything to add to what you've already said?
Look at the websites that are available, and I'll give some details of a couple that are very useful in terms of not charging for policies, procedures and thought processes to go through. And having undertaken that research, which you can do pretty easily and for free, if you've got specific issues in specific jurisdictions or in specific high-risk business areas, then talk to your advisors. Those may be accountants, they may be other business professionals, including lawyers, who are experienced in this area and can help you devise some protections and structures to find a way forward.
Okay, and Philippa?
Well, I'd obviously agree with what my two colleagues have said, but I think I'd also say don't be frightened about it. It is actually common sense, and if you follow good practice that you're probably following anyway, but perhaps be a bit more systemised about it and keep good records, then you'll probably be all right. But do look at it.
And David, as the voice of the Chambers of Commerce?
Well, the message is simply this is coming down the track. It's being implemented in April 2011. There is a lot of help out there, as colleagues have already said. But I would say get in touch with your local Chamber of Commerce. They'll have some practical help and advice.
Okay, David, thank you very much. Thanks to Philippa, thanks to Sean, thanks to Stuart. The message seems to be don't be scared, don't procrastinate. Best practice, whether small or large. And in the meantime, thanks to my guests and many thanks for watching. Bye-bye.